Every man once dreamed of being a martial master, practicing justice and loyalty, living as a hero journeying across the world. The sound they created was unlike that of any ordinary man. Everyone longed for such a life, yet not all could experience it. For this reason, boys often fantasized about it even more. A young man was shown hammering iron, working tirelessly until his creation was complete. What he forged was revealed to be a set of acupuncture needles. He handed them over to a customer, thanking him for waiting, and explained that these were the needles ordered. This young man was Tang, a 20-year-old physician. The narration declared that this was the kind of sound that could awaken the dreams of a boy and turn him into a hero. The man receiving the needles studied them carefully. After examining them, he asked Tang if he truly was a physician. Tang confirmed it, and the man unexpectedly requested to become his disciple. Tang was left in shock at the sudden proposal. The narration revealed that on that day, Mujin heard the sound of his life changing. The story then shifted back to a few months earlier. A quiet physician's morning was described. Medical scrolls were copied until the rooster crowed. Preparations for patients were finished before breakfast, and life repeated in silence. That silence was what had refined his father's skills. Mujin wondered if he too would someday reach the same level as his father. He was then seen running outside to gather herbs. On the way, he greeted people warmly until he accidentally collided with a man. The stranger responded rudely, scolding him for not watching where he was going. Mujin, frightened, quickly apologized sincerely and admitted his mistake. The man only laughed harshly and said Mujin needed to be taught how to behave properly. He then beat him mercilessly. The narration reminded that even then, Mujin still dreamed of being a hero. Later, Mujin appeared with two friends. His face was bruised from the beating, and the two boys burst into laughter at his state. One of them mocked him, saying he should have asked for a hit on the other eye so the colors would match. This boy was Zhang Guak, another 20-year-old, who worked as a herb gatherer. Zhang continued to tease Mujin, asking if he wanted him to give him another black eye. Annoyed and angry, Mujin lashed out and began to hit Zhang. Zhang cried out in pain, shouting that he had been poked in the eye and telling Mujin to stop. After their scuffle, both were left exhausted and hungry. Zhang asked if Mujin wanted to eat something good. Mujin agreed, and Zhang revealed a mushroom. At first, Mujin was confused, then quickly grew irritated, believing Zhang was still trying to mess with him. He scolded him for not knowing when to stop. Zhang hurriedly explained that this mushroom was actually very expensive, one that could let someone experience special kinds of dreams. Mujin was surprised, and Zhang declared that with this mushroom, one could even dream of becoming the king of kings or an ascended sage. Without giving him a choice, Zhang forced Mujin to eat it. He explained that last time, he had dreamed of becoming a pinnacle realm martial artist. In that dream, he had fought against 100 martial artists of the Qingqing sect and felt every sensation as if it were real. He assured that the mushroom's poison did no harm to the body. Tempted by the idea, Mujin grew greedy and ate the entire mushroom. Zhang shouted in shock, warning him not to eat it all. Mujin asked what was wrong, saying that if one bite could grant the experience of a pinnacle martial artist whose body and sword were one, then surely eating it all would allow him to become the master of swords himself. Frustrated, Zhang muttered that the mushroom's effects should not have kicked in so quickly. He reminded that it was Mujin's body, and he would not be responsible if anything went wrong. Mujin reassured him confidently, saying that as a physician, he knew how to judge such things. Zhang scoffed, saying he did not. He then added that the effects should appear soon, so they would wait. Soon, Mujin's mouth began to foam, and he repeated again and again that he was a physician. Then his mind shifted into another state. He began to narrate that embers tickled his skin like butterflies, that the sparks from the first strike of the hammer were always wondrous. He declared himself Tang Mujin, who had hammered iron as a blacksmith his entire life, and that this moment of creation never ceased to amaze him. Another man was then revealed hammering iron. He suddenly looked confused, asking himself if he was Tang Mujin. He corrected himself, saying his name was O Yezi, the unparalleled master of smithing under the heavens. He wondered why he had just dreamed of being a physician, realizing it must have been fatigue. He shook off the daze, determined to focus. He had been commissioned by the King of Yu to forge 5 master swords, and he swore to dedicate his all to them, declaring in the name of O Yezi that these would be his life's greatest work. The names of the 5 swords were revealed: Zhanlu, Juk, Shunxia, Yuchong, and finally, Chunjun. They were described as 5 master swords forged by the combined will of heaven and man for over 20 years. Their glory was praised, as they embodied the dreams of mankind and fulfilled the will of the heavens. The scene shifted to the heavens, where immortals celebrated. They poured heavenly peach wine, welcoming their new immortal. They cheered for Oyezi, declaring it a grand day as he reached paradise. In their joy, one immortal accidentally spilled wine onto the master, cutting the scene abruptly. It then returned to Tang Mujin, lying unconscious on the ground. A furious man shouted that he had been told this was the best physician in Chengdu. He had trusted the governor's attendance recommendation, but now, seeing Mujin collapse, he declared that such a novice physician, who could not even perform proper acupuncture, would be forced into retirement. As he stormed away, Zhang remained behind, pulling mocking faces at the official. He muttered that the man was indeed an arrogant fool, just like most government officials. Mujin could not understand what had just happened and felt lost, questioning to himself what had occurred only moments ago. Zhang explained that the sun was already setting, that Mujin had been rambling nonsense while high on the mushroom, and that he had suddenly insisted on returning to the clinic. He told him it was a miracle they managed to reach home without incident. Zhang warned him not to tell the physician about the mushroom and left the place angrily. Hearing this, Mujin felt unsettled. His memory of the events was blank, and he wondered if everything that happened was nothing more than a dream. When he finally reached home, he apologized to his father for arriving late. Father welcomed him warmly, but Mujin, still shaken, asked about the man who had just left their house in anger. He was referring to the same official who had stormed out earlier. As he noticed the needles, a sharp headache struck him. The pressure grew unbearable, and within it he felt another strange sensation. Between the waves of pain was an unfamiliar emotion. He wondered if it was frustration, but he could not understand what it was directed at. Li Cheng saw him distressed and asked if his head hurt. Mujin, trying to calm himself, denied it and said it was nothing. But the thought of that man still troubled him, and he asked again who he was. Father explained that the man was the military attendant of the governor. He had complained that Li Cheng's acupuncture was too painful, as the new needles were thicker than the old ones. Surprised, Mujin insisted that he had tested them himself earlier that morning. Father then showed his needles, saying the new set had been purchased 2 weeks ago after the older ones had bent. He told Mujin to take a closer look. As Mujin examined them, another wave of unease washed over him. He realized he was hearing something strange from the needles, a sound that had not been there when he tested them before. The pressure built again, clouding his mind. Father asked repeatedly what was wrong, concerned by his condition. Mujin could barely endure it any longer. His body shook under the weight of headaches and chills. Li Cheng concluded that he must have caught a cold, but Mujin cried out that it was too noisy, the sound overwhelming his senses. Li Cheng tried to ease him, offering to brew medicine. Yet Mujin stopped him suddenly, grabbing the needles from his hands. His eyes burned with a new intensity, a spark unlike before. In that moment, Mujin declared within himself the truth. It was the sound that awakened heroes. It was the sound he had heard that day. The next scene followed Mujin as he walked through the market, holding 2 needles in his hands, one old and one new, both belonging to Li Cheng. His expression carried the weight of confusion and irritation. Thoughts swirled in his mind as he admitted to himself that whenever he suddenly saw a poorly crafted item, it began to irritate him. Until just yesterday, he could not even tell what was shoddy or not. But now, because of this strange ability, everything around him appeared cheap and worthless. The constant awareness gnawed at him, driving him restless. Troubled, he turned his eyes to the old needle in his hand, and a shift of emotion crossed his face. Despite the turmoil, he felt a sudden sense of refreshment just by looking at it. He thought of it as the pride of Sichuan, crafted with the unmatched skill of blacksmith Suk. A quiet happiness rose in him, and he held the needle with respect, admiring it deeply. Yet soon another thought unsettled him. How did he suddenly know all of this? Where had this knowledge come from? His gaze moved to the new needle, and unease returned. He suspected it too had been made by blacksmith Suk, yet something about it felt different. A quiet worry lingered within him as he wondered if this difference was something serious. The scene then shifted as Mujin stepped into a sword shop. Rows of blades shimmered in the light, their varied forms and craftsmanship catching his eye. His earlier irritation faded as excitement overtook him. He admired the swords with delight, his hands drawn to one particular blade. The moment he held it close, all the irritation weighing him down seemed to vanish. He felt peace and wonder, overwhelmed by the exquisite craftsmanship. It was clear that this too was the work of blacksmith Suk, and he marveled at the subtle changes in Suk's artistry. In the market, people began to glance strangely at Mujin as he lunged toward a sword with sudden intensity. Holding it tightly, he reflected on a dream he once had of Oyezi. He wondered if that dream had given him the ability to recognize a true master's work. Along with this realization, he felt as though he could see blacksmith Suk's metalworking at a glance. He questioned whether the dream had granted him insight he never had before. But such thoughts troubled him, for a dream was supposed to be only a dream. Learning blacksmithing through a dream seemed impossible. Determined to confirm his doubts, Mujin stepped further into the shop. He resolved to go directly to blacksmith Suk himself and discover what had truly happened to him. Inside, a large man shouted angrily at him. This man was Suk Jaizong, the son of blacksmith Suk. He accused Mujin of disliking his needle and claimed that, despite not being as skilled as his father, he had spent 20 years at the forge. He demanded not to be treated like an amateur. Mujin, unsettled by the man's anger, quickly clarified that he had never doubted his skill. Inwardly, Mujin realized the elder blacksmith Suk had retired, leaving only a few refreshing works behind. The new needle must have been crafted by Jaizong himself. Jaizong, still upset, admitted how difficult it was to live up to his father's name. Even the people of the clinic now dared to belittle him. With sharp defiance, he challenged Mujin to find his father's works among the swords displayed in the shop. Confidently, he declared that Mujin should point out what he lacked compared to his father. In his mind, Jaizong believed there was no way Mujin could ever distinguish between good and bad swords. Yet, to his shock, Mujin picked out two of his father's swords instantly. Jaizong's thoughts froze in disbelief. He realized Mujin had immediately identified his father's work, and the difference was truly that great. He admitted aloud that most people overlooked these blades because of their simple designs. Mujin's eye was sharper than he had imagined. Mujin silently acknowledged that he had expected this outcome. If he had been wrong, Jaizong would never have spared the chance to mock him. Instead, this moment convinced him that the dream of Oyezi had not been an ordinary dream. Impressed, Jaizong admitted he had misjudged Mujin. At first, he had believed him to be only a picky customer, but now he understood why Mujin disliked his needle. Despite asking Mujin to find his father's works, he had selected each one correctly. Jaizong confessed that Mujin's eye might even surpass his own. With such sharp vision, he argued, Mujin could not remain a mere observer. There was only one answer. He must craft something himself. With that, Jaizong placed a heavy hammer into Mujin's hands. Mujin hesitated, gripped by nervousness, but Jaizong mocked him, threatening to craft another needle himself if Mujin thought it was impossible. Spurred by the challenge, Mujin steadied himself. He declared that he might never again have the chance to act as a blacksmith, so he would take it now. The practice began. Mujin raised the hammer and struck the metal with determination. Though nervous, he relied on the knowledge he had gained from the dream. As he worked, he compared it to asking a patient to prepare their own medicine and needle themselves. Still, he wanted to try hammering, and to his surprise, it worked. Excitement stirred in him as his blows grew sharper. Jaizong, watching closely, was stunned. He had expected to laugh at Mujin's clumsy attempts, but instead the hammer blows were flawless. Mujin worked like a natural blacksmith, just like Jaizong's father, who had spent his life at the forge. The sound of metal rang out like a clear musical note. Jaizong wondered if he was witnessing the reincarnation of Oyezi himself. This was not mere talent. It was something far greater. His thoughts raced with excitement as he urged silently for more. He wanted to see the striking, quenching, tempering, sharpening, and even the making of the handle and sheath. He longed to witness the complete weapon taking form in Mujin's mind. As his thoughts swelled, Mujin completed a sword. He was about to let it drop to the ground, but Jaizong caught it just in time. Mujin calmly told him to melt the piece down. Jaizong was so mesmerized by Mujin's forging that he froze in place. But Mujin's voice rang out again with renewed determination. His arms were now warmed up, and it was time to make a proper needle. Jaizong's eyes gleamed with excitement as he watched closely, though his intense stare made Mujin slightly uneasy. Still, Mujin worked with full focus, crafting the needle with care. The scene shifted. Using the needle, Mujin's father treated an old man, who immediately felt relief. Another old man scoffed in disbelief, questioning how it could not hurt. Yet soon after, even he was treated and felt great relief. The new needle allowed treatments to be carried out with remarkable effectiveness. Word spread quickly. Crowds of patients began to gather at Mujin's home, seeking relief from their ailments and exhaustion. The Tang family's name grew widely respected. Even weary travelers from distant places visited the family to recover their strength. One day, two travelers spoke to each other about the Tang family's rising fame. Nearby, an old man listened silently to their words before walking away. The following morning, the Tang clinic opened to yet another crowd. Lines stretched long, but tension arose when a man tried to cut through. Someone shouted angrily at him for breaking the line. But the old man who had arrived earlier did not respond. The angered man grew louder, but suddenly froze when the old man pointed a sword at his neck. Mujin's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. A quarrel had broken out between martial artists. The old man declared he would show the truth firsthand. With a swift motion, he struck the man's chest, drawing blood. Mujin rushed forward immediately, stopping the bleeding before it grew worse. In that moment, he noticed that the cut had only pierced the skin, leaving bones and organs untouched. It was clear to him that the old man was a master of martial arts. He tried to recall the name by which this man was known. The old man, meanwhile, mocked the wounded man. He laughed at him for crying like a child and fainting from such a small cut. He assured him it was only a scratch, and that a few days of medicine would heal it completely. Yet, with a smirk, he remarked that such care would only be possible if this were a proper clinic. At that moment, Mujin remembered. The name echoed in his mind. The physician killer. This eccentric man was none other than Li Cheng. Mujin thought of his father, recalling how watching him work always left a deep impression. His father might not have been the best physician in the lands, but he was like a strong tree holding firmly to its place. He was not flashy, but resilient. From him, Mujin had learned the proper attitude of a physician. The man now standing before him was the complete opposite of what he had learned from his father. He was known as the eccentric physician, a martial artist who had reached the pinnacle realm and roamed the lands. Among the three greatest physicians under the heavens, this eccentric man decided the fates of others with both sword and medical skill. Stories said his fickle murders never discriminated between good or evil, and he was branded a serial killer who had slain several dozen innocent physicians across the Jianghu. A sudden realization struck Mujin, and he feared for his father's safety. He saw Li Cheng heading toward his father's chamber and, filled with tension, he rushed forward, calling out for his father to be safe. At that moment, an instructor from the Qingqing sect, Jin, placed a hand on his shoulder and told him it was inevitable. Mujin, tense and anxious, turned to the head instructor, desperate for clarity. He wondered aloud if the branch leader could stop this man. But Jin calmly explained that even his own master would refuse to stand against the eccentric physician. Mujin protested, reminding Jin that the man was a criminal. But Jin revealed that his master owed his life to the eccentric physician. Mujin, shocked by the revelation, thought in disbelief that the eccentric physician had once saved the Qingqing sect branch leader's life. His heart sank, and he sat down with a heavy feeling of despair, worrying endlessly about his father. Jin tried to console him, explaining that though the eccentric physician was strange, he was not an evil man. Just then, Li Cheng pushed open the door to the chamber. Mujin and Jin froze, tense with anticipation, but Mujin quickly noticed that Li Cheng's clothes were spotless. Relief washed over him, knowing his father was unharmed. Li Cheng stepped forward, placed a hand on Mujin's shoulder, and casually mentioned that after speaking with physician Tang, he had heard about a skilled blacksmith nearby. He asked Mujin if he knew where to find this craftsman. Mujin felt the air leave his chest, but admitted that he did. Li Cheng pressed further, insisting that he lead the way. Hesitant and uneasy, Mujin agreed. As he walked ahead, the eccentric physician pressed the tip of his sword against Mujin's back, draining whatever courage remained in him. Li Cheng's unsettling smile only deepened the tension as he urged Mujin to move quickly, claiming he was busy. Mujin obeyed reluctantly. Soon, Mujin led him to Jaizeng. Li Cheng looked at the craftsman in surprise, learning that the boy himself had made the weapon. Mujin confirmed it, and the eccentric physician erupted into laughter. He remarked on the strangeness of Sichuan, amazed that the son of a physician knew blacksmithing. Jaizeng leaned close and whispered to Mujin, asking who this old man was. Mujin quietly replied that he was a martial artist. Still laughing, Li Cheng dismissed the matter of who crafted it, saying it did not matter. He admitted it had been a long time since he had laughed so freely. Then he asked for Mujin's name, confirming that it was Tang Mujin, and ordered him to craft 30 acupuncture needles. He tossed down a gold ingot as payment, leaving both Mujin and Jaizong stunned. Mujin gathered his composure and thanked him, suggesting he get something to eat while the work was completed, promising the needles would be ready before the sun set. Li Cheng, startled, questioned the claim. He noted that even renowned blacksmiths required months to craft such tools. Yet Mujin was saying they would be ready today. Mujin stood firm, insisting he could finish them by today. Li Cheng challenged his claim, remarking that they would not be low-quality products, and that he had not prepared them in advance. He questioned how a physician's child could make such bold promises, and warned him not to let greed misguide him. Despite the doubts, Mujin declared that he would start immediately. He promised to deliver work of higher quality than his father's, fresh from the furnace, assuring that there was no need to worry. He believed he could truly do it. Jaizong assured Li Cheng that Mujin truly could do it. Li Cheng then sat down, and the sight of his sword made Mujin's heart tremble. He thought to himself that he had almost forgotten how dangerous this man really was. With a laugh, Li Cheng reminded him to keep his word. Mujin agreed, and immediately began the task. As he worked, Mujin reflected on the process. Crafting acupuncture needles was grueling, requiring the creation of large quantities of wire, selecting only the finest pieces, and grinding them down to the sharpest point. The needles owned by physician Tang were not born from luck, but skill. He wanted to see this with his own eyes. His thoughts trailed to Li Cheng, noting how fit his body seemed for someone known as a physician. Watching closely, Li Cheng became impressed, astonished by the dedication and effort with which Mujin carried out the work. Time passed, and eventually Mujin completed the requested set of needles. He presented them to Li Cheng, who once again rewarded him with a gold ingot. Then, to his surprise, Li Cheng asked if he wished to become his disciple. Mujin hesitated, nervous, and asked why such an offer would be made to him. Li Cheng explained that he should not remain confined to a small town as a physician for the rest of his life, and questioned whether the idea did not appeal to him. Mujin admitted that he was interested, but he also had duties at the clinic, and had only just begun working at the forge. He expressed doubt about what he could truly learn from Li Cheng. With another laugh, Li Cheng revealed that there were 2 things he could teach. Curious, Mujin asked what they were. Without warning, Li Cheng demonstrated his skill, slicing a stone behind them into shape with only a needle, and striking Jaizong's shoulder with another so subtly that none of them had noticed until it happened. The display carried a touch of magic that left Jaizong deeply impressed. Li Cheng finally stated the answer. Martial arts and medicine were what he offered to teach. Mujin's heart raced with thoughts of the opportunity. A pinnacle realm martial artist, and one of the 3 great physicians as his master. This was a chance to learn both martial arts and medicine together. If he became his disciple, even the Qingqing sect would not dare mistreat his family clinic. Yet still, Mujin asked why such an offer was made to him. Li Cheng replied that it was convenient to travel with a quick and skilled blacksmith. When Mujin pressed further, wondering if that was truly the only reason, Li Cheng answered that in return he would receive martial and medical knowledge. Mujin pointed out that such terms sounded more like a contractual relationship than discipleship. Li Cheng agreed that if he wished to call it that, he could. Then, he suddenly tested Mujin, asking how one would treat a patient with weak qi, cold limbs and shivering. Mujin answered that the fluid imbalance must first be treated, prescribing medicine made from poria and licorice root. Pleased, Li Cheng declared that he had passed the test. Mujin, startled, wondered what he meant. Li Cheng explained that memorizing the Shanghan Luan and Neijing texts meant he could indeed learn martial arts. Mujin questioned what those texts had to do with martial arts, but Li Cheng scolded the idea that strength alone mattered. He explained that fools who lacked understanding, no matter how much knowledge was handed to them, would stagnate as second- or third-rate fighters. Mujin quietly repeated those words, uncertain. Li Cheng continued, stating that such fools could never grasp the superiority of acupuncture needles. Mujin then asked if Li Cheng thought he himself could become a first-rate martial artist. The eccentric physician replied that a student surpassing his master depended more on the master's teaching ability than on the student's talent, and left the words hanging for him to ponder. With that, Li Cheng departed. Mujin returned home, excitement bubbling inside him. His mind repeated the possibilities, thinking that he would at least attain the pinnacle realm. He shouted to himself with joy, leaping about in happiness. It was then that his father appeared. Mujin quickly apologized for being late. His father placed a hand on his shoulder, his expression heavy with emotion. Tears welled up as he confessed his fear when he learned Mujin had been taken by the eccentric physician. He explained that when the man first entered his chamber, he thought him no more than a curious visitor. He asked if Mujin was safe. Mujin reassured him that the man was not as dangerous as the rumors claimed. His father admitted that Jin Song had said the same, and was relieved to see him unharmed. But then he questioned what had taken so long, since Mujin had only gone to lead him to the blacksmith. Mujin hesitated, then explained that the eccentric physician had offered to take him as a disciple. He had until tomorrow night to decide. To him, it seemed strange, yet fitting of such an eccentric man, to make such an unexpected offer. His father froze at the words, silent in place. Concerned, Mujin asked why he had stopped. Without answering, his father hurried inside and returned with a pouch of silver, pressing it into Mujin's hands. Mujin was confused, asking what the money was for. His father told him simply to go. Mujin was stunned. He protested, saying he should not leave when the clinic was already short on hands, and reminded him that the man's very title was eccentric physician. He believed it had been no more than a passing whim. But his father was firm. The clinic would be fine. Now was the only time he would have the chance to leave. Mujin thought of his father in that moment, always believing him to be like a sturdy tree guarding their town. Yet those words made him realize something new. His father, too, once upon a time, had been a boy. Under the shade of a tree, Mujin sat in meditation, his body surrounded by a faint blue aura as he practiced martial arts. In his heart, he acknowledged that it had only been 2 days since he had begun, yet he had already succeeded in achieving small circulation. For the first time, he felt a sensation flowing through every corner of his body. Days passed 3, then 4, and though his energy was weak, clear internal power steadily accumulated, little by little. He recognized it as more than just growth. It was advancement. This, he thought, was the only chance he had to leave, and with quiet gratitude, he thanked his father. Above him, Li Chung sat perched on a tree branch. With playful ease, he tossed down a walnut that struck Mujin's head and teased him about being homesick. Mujin, startled, quickly explained that his internal energy felt stronger today than it had yesterday. Amused, Li Chung descended, remarking on the interesting times ahead. Mujin, full of confidence, admitted that he must indeed have talent. Li Chung studied him carefully, acknowledging his progress but dismissing it as only average compared to others. Mujin, however, smiled brightly, proud of himself. He pointed out that while others took 10 days to achieve small circulation, he had done so in just 2. Perhaps, he thought, the strange dream of Oyezi had granted him martial arts talent as well. Li Chung frowned at the nonsense, but then handed him a sword. Keeping a simple wooden stick for himself, he challenged Mujin. If the boy could manage to cut even a piece of his clothing, he would carry him on his back all the way out of Sichuan province. Mujin grew nervous at the weight of the real blade in his hand. It was sharp, dangerous, something that could take his life. Yet, with a spark of ambition, he considered that after 10 days of advancement, perhaps he could land a surprise attack while Li Chung was off guard. Gathering his courage, he leapt forward to strike. Li Chung, scratching his ear casually, chuckled at Mujin's boldness. With nothing but his wooden stick, he deflected the attack with ease. Mujin froze in disbelief, realizing that his sword had not left even a scratch. The stick had stopped him completely. Li Chung, with calm authority, told him to bite down hard on his molars. Suddenly, a powerful aura surged from Li Chung's body. Mujin sensed it. It was not merely a wave, but a massive current crashing into him. He was thrown back violently, struggling to catch his breath. His mind reeled at the experience. Li Chung asked how it felt to receive internal energy for the first time. Mujin, gasping with anger and confusion, protested that it made no sense. He had believed the one with greater internal energy should always be the stronger. Li Chung only laughed, admitting that while that might sometimes be true, he himself possessed little energy and avoided relying on raw power. Martial arts, he explained, was not that simple. He asked why Mujin, a physician, was so desperate, as if he had someone he wanted to defeat. Mujin reminded him that he had promised to make him into a peak master. With a sharp smack to his forehead, Li Chung corrected him. If strength was only about the quantity of internal energy, then beginning training so late made becoming a peak master impossible. But there were many paths to mastery, even with weak energy and without flashy techniques. He reminded Mujin of how, when he had just received internal energy, he had resisted by channeling force into his sword before withdrawing. That, too, was a valid path forward. He ordered Mujin to attack again, promising not to use internal energy this time. Fueled by determination, Mujin leapt once more with all his strength. For a fleeting moment, he felt as if his blade had the power to cut through Li Cheng's wooden stick. But within seconds, everything changed. Overwhelmed by Li Cheng's superior technique and presence, he was struck down, his body crashing to the ground. Li Cheng pointed out coldly that even without using internal energy, Mujin would have died 3 times already. His rate of energy accumulation was far from fast. Mujin, breathless and defeated, realized the harsh truth. Once again, Li Cheng rapped him on the head with his stick. He told Mujin that he lacked the special constitution needed to handle large amounts of internal energy. Yet, despite these shortcomings, the boy possessed his own unique advantages. His energy sense was sharp, his manipulation of force quick and precise. Though his swordsmanship was clumsy and could only be considered third-rate, the way he instinctively infused internal force into his strikes already displayed the reactions of a second-rate martial artist. Li Cheng reminded Mujin that even wandering aimlessly could become a path, and for just 10 days of training, his progress was excellent. Proud of himself, Mujin believed this meant he was already a second-rate martial artist. Li Cheng immediately regretted praising him, while Mujin boldly declared himself a genius. Their attention shifted when Mujin spotted a figure lying among the bushes. Li Cheng wondered if it was a wild beast, but Mujin noticed the 2 legs and realized it was a person. Li Cheng observed the 3 knots on the man's attire, recognizing him as a branch master of the mountains. Mujin grew excited, assuming that a branch master meant someone close to being a peak master. As they approached, Li Cheng questioned the man about any strange diseases spreading in the area. The man introduced himself as Hong Juzhen, branch master of Jul village, also called Hong Jialgi. He explained that consecutive deaths had struck his village, and he had left to search for a physician elsewhere. For him, meeting them was a great fortune. On the road to Jul village, Hong spoke of their journey. He remarked that even for someone bad with directions, wandering half a day on what should have been a 2-hour trip was strange. He admitted he had never once left the village in his entire life. Mujin was relieved that neither of them had caught the strange disease. Hong agreed, saying that both he and his master had been fortunate. He described how it all began about a month ago, when villagers first started falling ill. At first, it was mistaken for the usual seasonal cough, but soon more than half the village was affected, and 20 people had already died. Though many fled the disease, Hong refused to leave the village and its people behind. He stayed with his master to care for the patients alongside the village physician. But when the medicine ran out, his master promised to fetch herbs from the mountain, asking him to take care of the sick until he returned. Even after the promised date, his master had not come back, perhaps delayed by the difficulty of finding herbs. Hong expressed gratitude for their presence, thankful for the guidance back home and hopeful for the help they could provide. Soon, the village came into view. At Jul village, Guardian Majiangi Hong Jian welcomed them and brought them inside a home where a sick child lay. Mujin carefully checked the boy's condition. From a brief touch of the pulse, he noted the heavy sweating, sticky skin, and a weak yet rapid heartbeat. The ears burned hot while the hands remained cool, showing that heat was rushing to the head. The parents explained that the child had vomited, complaining of dizziness and head pain. Mujin assessed the symptoms: damp heat, rapid pulse, steaming stagnation, irritability, and vomiting. It was an epidemic-type condition. Li Cheng pressed for a clear diagnosis and treatment. Mujin reasoned that though it resembled summer heat fire poison, it lacked the characteristic sour odor. If untreated, the heat could rise to the head and cause blindness or even idiocy. Acupuncture at points such as Linqi, Muchuang, Zhengying, Chengling, and Naogong would be necessary, supported by medicines like Maimendong, guala seed, Jegging, and Baimu depending on the progression. Li Cheng smiled with pride, recognizing that Mujin had studied the inner classic thoroughly. He urged him to perform the acupuncture immediately. Nervously, Mujin prepared his needles, trying to recall the Linqi point and wondering if he could do it correctly on his first attempt. Before he acted, Li Cheng used his own energy to guide the way. He revealed that teaching Mujin energy circulation had never been only for martial arts, but also for his growth as a physician. For someone like Mujin, sharp energy sense and manipulation were an incredible blessing. Shocked, Mujin realized he could see inside the child's body with clarity, as if peering into a clear stream filled with pebbles. Within, he detected something far darker, an evil energy festering. Li Cheng confirmed his perception and instructed him to proceed with acupuncture to observe the reaction. Mujin placed the needles at the necessary points, channeling his energy with care. Soon, the evil energy within the child dispersed and vanished. The villagers were astonished, praising him for his skill, and Li Cheng looked at him with satisfaction. With a warm smile, he declared that this day had been one of great learning. Among all the faces Mujin had shown, this one, proud and fulfilled as a physician, was the best. In that moment, Mujin had truly become what he was meant to be. Yet as the village settled into relief, a shadow loomed above. From the rooftop of a nearby house, a suspicious figure silently observed them. As the next scene unfolded, Li Cheng and Mujin were walking alongside a man. During the walk, Mujin recalled the story of Dr. Yom. He remembered how, when the epidemic had broken out, the doctor had used all his savings to treat the villagers. The journey continued with this thought lingering in Mujin's mind, tying their present steps to the sacrifices made in the past. The man walking with them began to explain how Dr. Yom had once insisted that only rare and costly herbs from distant regions could help against the epidemic. He had taken all his money to the herbalist. Mujin, listening to this, felt that the doctor must be a good man. The man confirmed this, saying the villagers were moved by his sacrifice and pooled together funds, so he would have enough when the herbalist arrived. Since no herbalist visited such a remote mountain village regularly, Dr. Yom had gone into the mountains himself to gather herbs to help the people. The man admitted he had disliked how Jusani often lazed around, but if Jusani had not brought these doctors here, his own son would not have survived. He apologized for rambling out of worry for his sick child, then led them to his home. Though the house was empty, he welcomed them to rest there. Inside, Mujin and Li Cheng settled in. On the floor, Li Cheng noticed a doll lying abandoned. He picked it up and placed it carefully on the table. Mujin, watching him, reflected again that Dr. Yom truly seemed like a good man. Li Cheng agreed, saying they would meet him soon. Mujin then wondered how such a kind village, blessed with good doctors and generous people, could still fall victim to plague, especially when food and gifts had been offered to them so warmly. Li Cheng reminded him to eat only what was necessary and return the rest, as there was no need to add to the villagers' burden. Mujin agreed, though his thoughts returned to the strange illness. He asked about the nature of the plague, and Li Cheng admitted that while there were similar diseases, something about this one felt unfamiliar, perhaps even entirely new. Mujin was shocked that even one of the three great physicians could not identify it. But Li Cheng told him there was much he did not know. For every truth discovered, many new mysteries always followed. Mujin admitted he had believed Li Cheng knew every disease in existence, but the older man dismissed the idea, saying if he had known everything, he would not wander the world. As Mujin listened, he asked if there had ever been a disease Li Cheng had longed to cure. The physician revealed there was one. He could cure it now, but at the time he had been too late. Mujin asked what he meant, and just then, the distant sound of funeral cries drifted in from outside. Mujin felt a heaviness in his chest, realizing that medicine meant nothing without knowledge of the illness. He wished he could have known, wished he could have saved them. Li Cheng then revealed the truth of his past. His wife and daughter had both burned with fever one day, their bodies marked by red spots. He had gone to a doctor, then even summoned a renowned physician from the next village, but neither could treat them. While he searched for another answer, both his wife and daughter died, their lives lost within 4 days of falling ill. Mujin expressed his condolences, but Li Cheng did not call it a sorrowful story. Instead, he said the second half almost seemed laughable. After suffering and wandering away from his home, he had arrived at a small village, 10 days later though it should have been only one. There, a country doctor with an untrustworthy face had heard his story and calmly prescribed medicine, asking only for 5 niang. The doctor had said that given on time, the illness would have been easily cured. Li Cheng admitted he had possessed dozens of silver niang, enough to marry off his daughter multiple times. His family had not died from poverty, incompetence, or lack of herbs, but because one doctor did not know what another did. To him, that was the most laughable truth of all. That realization had driven him to become a doctor himself, determined to gather the wisdom of every physician into one place. Yet after 30 years, even his wife and daughter's faces had grown faint in his memory. Mujin was stunned, sensing in the old man's laughter a grief that sounded like a funeral wail. Later, Mujin prepared to investigate further. He told Li Cheng he would search the village for the source of the illness. Li Cheng allowed it, saying he would join shortly, but warned Mujin not to waste time. Mujin reassured him and went on his way. His search began at the pig house, then moved to a storage house, and finally to the first home struck by the sickness. He confirmed this with a villager and fought deeply. The cold plague chilled the body while the hot plague burned it, yet both came from evil chi that thrived in dark and foul places. Still, he could not sense such energy anywhere, neither in the pens, nor the wells, nor the cellars. An epidemic usually spread outward in a circle from its origin, but something here felt strange. Mujin asked Jiangyi if the disease had spread in order from Zhang's illness, and Jiangyi confirmed that it had, with the west side affected before the east and children before adults. The pieces seemed to fit, and yet did not. Mujin asked what differences existed between the west and east sides of the village. Hong explained that people often said the east had stronger yang energy, while the west carried more yin. Mujin dismissed this, noting that he and Li Cheng had entered from the west without seeing signs of plague. He then wondered why the children had fallen ill first, realizing all they did was play together. Hong mentioned their favorite play spot was by the creek on the west side. That struck Mujin. Could the creek water be the source? But there was also a well on the east, and it had not seemed murky. He asked Jiangyi if the east well was always dry, and the elder explained it only dried briefly in spring. Mujin pressed further, comparing the timing of the epidemic with the drying of the well, and Jiangyi admitted it had begun around the same time. The realization hit Mujin hard. If the east well had dried, the entire village would have turned to creek water. It made sense then that the west side and children were struck first. Soon after, he went with Hong and Jiangyi to the creek. Looking at the water, he noted it appeared clean, neither murky nor foul-smelling, but all evidence pointed to it. The only way forward was to test it. He lifted some water in his hand, feeling it carefully until he sensed something unusual. Following the clue, he pointed to the hills and led them forward. They climbed, passing rocky paths, until an odor reached them. Mujin asked if the others smelled it too, and Hong confirmed the strange scent. The further they went, the stronger it became, until an unsettling aura covered the hills. The trees stood dead and lifeless, and Mujin wondered what terrible thing lay ahead to have caused such ruin. Moving forward, the ground beneath them began to feel soft. The soil grew weaker, and their feet sank into it. Mujin realized something was hidden beneath the earth, and remarked that there was indeed something buried in the soil. The scene shifted into a dim herb storeroom where Mujin was preparing medicine. He reflected on the nature of the place, a storeroom filled with dried herbs and dead animals, yet instead of decay, it carried a soft fragrance he once liked. It was a scent of death that still held traces of life, a fragrance that became someone's hope to survive. As these thoughts lingered, the present unfolded with Mujin and Hong digging through the soil. From beneath the ground, the rotting bodies of dead animals began to appear, leaving Mujin shocked at the sight. He realized that unlike the storeroom, this place reeked only of pure death, a stench that spread further death across the land. He could not help but wonder who was responsible and why such cruelty was done. Mujin urged Hong and Jiangyi to dig everything up and move it far from the stream. The sight of countless corpses left Jiangyi trembling with fear, but together with Hong, he began pulling the carcasses out one by one. Watching this, Mujin muttered to himself that even a brief exposure to such an infective toxin could bring countless plagues. Unlike poisonous herbs or minerals that kill instantly, this was the work of someone who deeply understood the slow and lethal nature of an infective toxin. He realized that the timing of this act, coinciding with the well drying up and the thorough preparations made behind it, had only one purpose: extermination. The thought shook him to his core, and his body began trembling uncontrollably. At that moment, a man arrived carrying a blood-soaked bag. He questioned why someone would commit such an act on another's hard-earned land after all their struggles. Rage flared within Jiangyi when he recognized the man and shouted the name Dr. Yom. Mujin froze in shock at hearing the name and pieced the truth together in his mind. Dr. Yom had known exactly what would happen by using such toxins. He had been fully aware of the village's condition and he had only begun charging for treatment after the plague took hold. The horrifying realization struck Mujin. Dr. Yom was the true culprit, a healer who wore the face of compassion but sowed only death, a demon driven by greed. His vile hunger sought to devour Jewelcon village entirely, and even when exposed, he remained brazen. Mujin trembled with fury, thinking that such a man deserved nothing less than a brutal death. Jianggi, overwhelmed with anger, confronted Dr. Yom directly, accusing him of creating the plague and pretending to cure it. Dr. Yom admitted without remorse that after living a life of good deeds, he only wanted to handle business for once. His words ignited Jianggi's fury, and he launched at him, screaming that countless lives had already been lost. In his rage, he hurled the skull of an animal at Dr. Yom, but before it could reach him, one of Yom's men intercepted it, cutting the skull cleanly into 2 pieces. Dr. Yom responded with a twisted laugh, declaring that he felt no need to care about the dead. To him, the only truth was that these people had ruined his hard work, and now they would pay with their lives. Whether it was today or tomorrow, he claimed he had always planned to throw them all into a pit, and now their turn had simply arrived earlier. His words dripped with malice as he demanded their deaths. Hong, Mujin, and Jianggi were shaken with both anger and disbelief at his cruelty. Jianggi roared, gripping a large stick in his hand, declaring himself as the beggar sect guardian, Ma Jianggi Hongyan. His furious outburst drew mocking laughter from Dr. Yom, but his men were not as calm. They grew alarmed, realizing that someone of such status stood before them, and quickly turned to question their master. They demanded to know why he had claimed only weaklings were present, when in fact, a beggar sect guardian stood in their path. Dr. Yom, now unsettled, stammered in confusion, claiming he had no idea. Jianggi tightened his grip on the club and took his stance, setting himself for battle. His gaze locked on the lackeys nearby, and he declared that he would begin counting. He promised to punish only one with his weapon, sparing others if possible. With firm resolve, he addressed Dr. Yom, insisting he wanted no more meaningless deaths in the village, begging him to leave peacefully before more blood was spilled. Mujin, watching this, felt astonished. Elder Ma Jianggi had frozen the enemy with his overwhelming presence alone. Hong urged Mujin that now was his chance, telling him to run away. He swore to throw him across the stream so he could escape. Hong commanded that once Mujin landed, he must not look back but go straight to the village and tell them everything that had happened. Mujin hesitated, apologizing for asking for such help. He pointed out that Hong and Jianggi were both a branch and guardian, true experts, and wondered if top-ranked warriors should really act this way. Hong dismissed the thought, saying rank meant nothing. What mattered was that he and his master must fight. Dr. Yom sneered at their determination, mocking them as nothing more than 2 beggars and a physician. He insisted this was the perfect time to strike, questioning if they planned to fight the entire village on their own. Mujin's voice shook as he declared their intent to die fighting, yet confusion gnawed at him, wondering why they, powerless beggars, would go this far. Mujin asked why they would not escape together. He reasoned that if the strange physician ran with them to the village, it might save lives, but admitted that with their skills, they could never protect him while fleeing. He insisted they should instead stand firm and keep the village safe. He explained that they had lived off the kindness of villagers their whole lives, but they were not ashamed. They had survived on what the villagers gave, and now, when the time had come, they would fight for the people. That, he remembered, was the teaching of their master. Jianggi began counting as he prepared to strike, his determination clear. Meanwhile, Dr. Yom turned to his followers with promises of erasing their gambling debts if they killed now. His voice rang with desperation and greed as he declared it was all or nothing, demanding they kill. The men roared back with agreement, shouting that there was no turning back now. In the midst of this chaos, Hong suddenly grabbed Mujin by the waist and hurled him high into the air. Mujin soared across the battlefield, stunned, his thoughts spiraling as he descended. He questioned himself, wondering if running away was truly the right thing to do. He asked himself what would happen to Hong and Jianggi if he simply fled. He doubted the enemy were true experts and believed that if he joined the fight, there might be a chance to win. But before he could decide, a man struck him mid-flight, sending him crashing to the ground. Mujin scrambled up, shaken, and began to run, his mind in turmoil. He tried to convince himself this was not cowardice, but an act of respect, fulfilling their request to deliver Jewel Village's cry for help to the world. Yet another voice inside mocked him, calling it nothing but running. His heart ached as he thought of Master Ma Jiangyi and Hongyan, certain they would die fighting. He lamented his weakness, realizing he had only just begun to learn martial arts and had nothing real to offer in battle. If only he were a top-ranked master, he thought, he would not be running now. Doubt filled him as he wondered if Hongyan truly was a top-ranked master. In the midst of his flight, he stopped. His mind turned, his body trembled, and his decision solidified. He turned back, resolved to return to Hong and Jiangyi. Mujin ran with his heart pounding, memories flooding back. He remembered once helping a child who had been bullied by the Qingqing kids for being slow. That day he was beaten badly, but he had felt proud, like a hero standing against injustice. Yet now, his thoughts were different. He wished the road ahead was longer, hoping the fight would already be over before he arrived. Cowardly thoughts filled his mind, but he knew if he turned back now, his life would become one of endless running away. Through the bushes, he caught sight of Jiangyi and Hong locked in a desperate battle with several men. They were battered and bleeding, and Mujin's mind raced with panic, wondering how he could help. The enemies struck them ruthlessly, but still Jiangyi and Hong refused to surrender. One of the men sneered at their resistance, mocking them for fighting to the bitter end. Jiangyi shouted back with defiance, saying that crawling through filth or corpses was still better than crawling through trash. The enemy warned that both master and disciple were already dead men walking and taunted Jiangyi, calling his determination pathetic. But Jiangyi dismissed the notion of giving up as nonsense. The fight grew fiercer. Jiangyi tried to escape, but one man chased after him with an axe, yelling for his death. Fear gripped Hong, yet it only fueled his strength as he fought harder against another attacker. Jiangyi threw dirt into his opponent's face to strike back, but the man's axe landed against his back, and Jiangyi cried out in pain. Hong froze, his heart aching as memories of their time together rushed back. Then rage consumed him. He seized the axe and struck down his enemy. Another foe lunged at him from behind, but before the blow landed, a rock flew and struck the man's face, thrown by Mujin. The man stumbled, cursing Mujin as a pathetic bastard. Hong took the chance and killed the opponent with the axe. Then another assailant rushed forward with a knife, charging straight at Mujin. He mocked him as a physician's brat, saying he should have kept running instead of coming back to die. Mujin stood frozen as the blade neared, but in that moment Li Cheng appeared. With a swift motion, he slit the attacker's throat, ending the threat instantly. He calmly stated that these men were the ones behind the plague. Mujin, trembling with fury, declared that Dr. Yom was the true culprit. Li Cheng asked if that was really so. The surviving enemies turned on Mujin, kicking and beating him. Dr. Yom fell to his knees, begging desperately for his life. He promised to give them medicine stronger than anything in Jewel Village, trying to bargain with words of false hope. He spoke of the black peony, an elite elixir almost as great as the Daewondan, a legendary flower known as the hero's flower. He offered it in exchange for his life, and revealed the true black peony, hidden inside a cave. Mujin's rage boiled over. He nearly struck the doctor down, furious that lives had been traded so cheaply for such a poisonous treasure. But Li Cheng stopped him, explaining the truth. The real black peony grew by feeding on death, which was why Yom had gathered so many bodies. Any ordinary person who touched it would be consumed by its energy and die. If the villagers had all perished, their corpses would have become food for the flower. Mujin realized that even he and Li Cheng might have been intended as sacrifices. Perhaps Dr. Yom had planned all along to stall for time, pretending to harvest and process it, only to later poison them. Yom denied it in panic, insisting that processing the black peony was extremely difficult. He claimed he had intended to offer it to them. Mujin pointed out how strange it was for a village doctor to hold such deep knowledge, though Yom dismissed it as nothing more than a cheap trick. Li Cheng calmly picked up the black peony, saying it was too bad, because he was not an ordinary person. Yom panicked, warning that bare-handed contact with the flower meant certain death. But before he could say more, Li Cheng moved with cold precision. Without hesitation, he slit Dr. Yom's throat, ending his life in silence. Then, standing over the corpse, he declared that matters of life and death would be his to decide. Li Cheng grew irritated, questioning why trashy doctors kept appearing. He dismissed them as riffraff who believed learning medicine automatically made them real physicians. Mujin hesitated, unsure if everything was truly okay. But Li Cheng brushed it aside. He explained that his nickname did not come from gambling. He would absorb the toxins from the corpse and the black peony himself, instructing Mujin to step back and take Hong Jialgi to safety. Mujin agreed. Li Cheng sat down, focusing his energy to draw out the poison. The toxins were powerful, but he endured. Soon, he purified a flower infected with poison, restoring it into a clean form. Mujin had not even realized the process. Handing the flower to Mujin, Li Cheng assured him it was now safe to consume without side effects. Mujin thanked him. Li Cheng told him that by uncovering the physician's plot, Mujin was more than qualified. Mujin disagreed, insisting he was not qualified at all. He had run away, returned only to throw a rock, and acted merely out of fear of being called a coward. Li Cheng countered, pointing out that even Hong Jialgi looked at Mujin as if he truly was qualified. Returning after running away was harder than facing things head-on. Such a choice could only be made by confronting duty and accepting mistakes. Running, he said, was not shameful. Only an idiot would never run. What mattered was not turning away from duty. He laughed at himself for offering too much wisdom, joking that Mujin probably would not even understand such profound words. Mujin ate the flower. Li Cheng was shocked, asking if he had really eaten it just like that. Mujin nodded, thinking it was the right time. Li Cheng scolded him, asking why he would eat it now. Mujin defended himself, saying it seemed like the right moment. The three of them moved forward again, with Hong carrying the injured Jianggi on his shoulder. Li Cheng continued to scold Mujin for consuming the elixir without knowing the proper cultivation method, questioning if someone had been about to steal it. Mujin explained that Li Cheng had not said much, so he thought it meant to take it immediately. Li Cheng reminded him to follow the training of the Xuanwu divine art. Stand steady, control his breathing, mind his posture. Mujin asked for an explanation again. Li Cheng sighed, calling him both smart and an idiot. He explained carefully. Walk while drawing internal strength along the foot Taiyin spleen meridian, ensuring the entire soul touch the ground. Move slowly, mixing the energy from the lower body and lungs, creating an axis through Shenzhou, Zhizhong, and Yayangwen points. Those three were the unchangeable foundation of the Xuanwu divine art. The rest was transformation, guiding the black peony's power through the axis, again slowly. Mujin claimed he understood and was already doing it. Li Cheng shouted at him to stop talking back and do it properly. Soon, a powerful aura began to flow from Mujin's body. Li Cheng decided to gather his own energy before they reached the village. He noted that with proper training, Mujin could truly control the power. Mujin marveled at the tremendous strength of the black peony, but Li Cheng dismissed it, saying he was only licking the skin of an apple and mistaking it for real power. Mujin still had a long way to go, and he was instructed to practice the Xuanwu divine art whenever possible. Then Li Cheng told him to prove he was fine by dragging one of the men. Mujin clutched his stomach, still complaining. The group returned to Jul village with the medicine for the disease. The villagers rejoiced, their happiness overflowing. From a distance, Hong bowed deeply, silently expressing gratitude to Mujin and Li Cheng. Later, Mujin practiced martial arts. Li Cheng scolded him, warning that if dust entered the decoction, it would ruin the medicine. He teased Mujin, asking if he was protesting for sword training. He ordered him to pack quickly, as they had a long way to travel. Mujin protested, wondering why they had to leave when patients were still there. He suggested staying 5 more days to check on everyone. Li Cheng dismissed the idea. He never planned to come to Jul village in the first place, and had only stopped because Hong Jialgi asked. Mujin was surprised, realizing he had not seen Hong since the night before. Li Cheng explained that Hong had buried Elder Ma Jianggi and was probably starving somewhere as usual. Mujin was shocked that such a hero who saved the village would starve. Mujin thought to himself that in the Beggars' Guild, this was common. No matter how just the reason, a beggar who once begged for handouts but ended up killing people, even martial artists, would not be seen as a hero. Li Chung corrected him. It was no longer begging, but tribute. Mujin wondered what future awaited Hong Jialgi. Li Chung said only Hong could decide, because that was the nature of killing. They bid farewell to the villagers of Jul, and then visited Jianggi's grave. There, they found Hong, who had stayed all night without eating. Mujin offered him food, and asked if he planned to remain in Jul. Hong admitted he had lived there all his life, and had nowhere else to go. For him, surviving however he could was simply the way of a beggar. Mujin reflected that this too was the nature of killing. Mujin urged him to come along. Hong asked where. Mujin told him he would take him somewhere he could beg freely without worry, a place Elder Ma Jianggi would have wanted for him. He turned to Li Chung for agreement, but Li Chung had already walked ahead. Mujin pulled Hong along, running to catch up. Hong asked where they were headed. Li Chung teased him, saying that Mujin had never even asked once. For a genius, it was only natural to wonder. Mujin finally asked for the destination. Li Chung revealed it. Their next stop was Luoyang,